great pleasure to welcome Rodolphe Blanchard-Kowal. You may not know him. He started playing the cello and the Gamba as a teenager, has worked as a professional player, but is now working as a United Reformed Church minister in Sidcup. So he's got a new congregation to talk to. I won't say any more, I'll leave you to carry on, Rodolphe, and thank you to your team for helping.
I'm very pleased and honored to speak with you. It's a bit epic for me because I discovered the Bible Society of Great Britain when I was a teenager, when I started the Bible. When after buying a Bible, I took my membership to the Bible Society, and so it was just an imaginary place for me at the time. There was no internet as well. So there it's very concrete to be with you, sharing about French concert music. So my aim is not to speak too much, but to play samples of French concert music, and maybe to give you some useful information about French concert music. So I start with the first side. So French concert music, actually there's not much concert music in France, actually. And concert music is not really a French thing. This is a painting from the beginning of the 17th century, and you will struggle to find paintings or gravure with several viol players together. And the French at that time would call it un concert, but the word concert is really English and was not used. And when it's used today, it means something in English. So on the next slide, and I remember when I studied as a teenager and a young man, I studied the violin in France, and so at the time we were playing. You started, when you were a child, you would start with des basses danses from Renaissance. You would play any polyphony, European polyphony. And eventually, with my teacher, we would play the Piscina from L'Art de la Fugue or things like this. But most of the repertoire was English concert music. I mean, Gibbons, Bird, Tallis, Tompkins, or Jenkins, all these others we're very familiar with. So the French, they say consort when they do a concert. Because it's an English thing. So for France, I discern three periods that I'm going to describe. Renaissance and the time of la chanson française, which is something very important, as you know, in European music. So you've got this Franco-Flemish school that starts in the 15th century. La chanson française is famous in Europe, very much used in Italy as well. All these chansons are well known in Europe. The second period, the first 17th century, that's where we're going to spend most of our time. And the third period that is very short, very rare and special, which is late French concert music. So I start the next slide with la chanson française. In edition, I mean, you can date it to the start of the 16th century. Actually, the first volume from Petrucci was a volume of French chansons, actually. And so then you have the French editors like Pierre Attagnan, who is the first one, and then you've got chansons. And this can be played on the violins, of course. And so there, we're going to play one of my favorite ones that probably you know very well, Douce Mémoire. French editors in the 16th century. I mean, they were gathering music from different European composers, Italian and French composers. So Pierre Attendon, the first one, and Jacques Moderne, Adrien Leroy, Robert Ballard. Robert Ballard, the family will last until the 18th century, because these families, these editors, they would have royal privileges, and so they would have an extended work. So then, on the next slide, yes, something important in the 16th century is the French Psalter, Genevan Psalter, because it was the bestseller of the time. It's been a very popular book, and the tunes actually are very nice. It's not like maybe, I mean, I don't want to be negative, but like the Scottish Psalter, you don't get much of these tunes today because they were a bit austere. But the French Psalter is not austere. I mean, there are songs in it, and the melodies are nice. Maybe one of them, you know it very well, is the Old Hundreds, which is a very well-known hymn. This comes from this Psalter, and some of the first English tune used for the English Psalter come from the French or Genevan Psalter. So it was very popular. It was edited a lot at the end of the 16th century and the 17th century, and many composers made arrangements and motives, including at the end, like Swing in the Netherlands, still using the French or sometimes the German version. There was a German version with Ambrosius Wasser for the German reforms, but I mean, it is a very important book. Claude Lejeune, one of the major French composers at the beginning, end of the 16th, beginning of the 17th century. So these are great composers, and they're using the tunes from the French Psalter. So next slide. About playing in concerts, there is a genre that is very important, which is fantasy, la fantaisie. And so the first track you can find of the fantaisie is in Les Musiques de Joie, Musique de Joie de Jacques Moderne, 1550. So you see the word fantasy. So that's instrumental music that can be played on the viols. So we are not illustrating this now because I prefer to have more time with the things from the 17th century. So next slide. So these groups and composers are writing fantasy that can be played on the violin, or that are specifically written for the violin. But there's not as much as what you have in England at that time. At the end, you have Claude Lejeune and Eustache du Courant. Claude Lejeune, I have to say something about him because he's been composing a lot on the sounds, but also he's been inventing a way to sing with the rhythm of the language, like in antiquity. That was like a kind of experiment that he did himself. He had not much future and not much heritage, but he was a composer using very complex rhythms. So you might be a bit puzzled when you play some music, so that may be a bit difficult. But there will be other choices by composers in the 17th century to write song music, to put a rhythm on the words and find the right way of do recitativo, if you want. And this will come from Italy, not from his own experiments. So what he did, Lejeune, is a bit puzzled and complicated. So, but anyway, there are very good fantasies from him. So now we are entering, did I say more? I want to say about the Renaissance. Yes, there's so much more to say anyway. So now we are entering in a new period, 17th century, after La Chanson Française, that was very much played and used everywhere in Europe. There's a new genre in France, which is air de cour, which is the equivalent of the blues songs that you have around Downland and other blues lists. We've got the same movement in France. It's not with an 8-course flute, but it's with a 10-course flute. And there's a lot of songs composed at that time, and lots of flutelist composers. So that opens a new era in a way. These composers also write the ballet royaux for the court to dance. And during this time, the figure bass is progressively introduced, but as you know, there is a kind of reluctance outside from Italy to introduce the figure bass in other nations. So it will take some time in France to come to the figure bass. Because there is a very noble style with the lute that the French want to keep in a way. So on the next slide, yes, we're going to play the music of one of these composers of the time of Les Airs du Cours. So Etienne Mouminier was an organist in the southern of France, Béziers. He composed many airs du Cours, accompanied by this 10-course flute. Motets. He was serving in the chapel of a prince, and he was the brother of the king. So a very important composer, maybe the greatest motet composer before Dumont and Charpentier. And so he's been writing fantasies for the violin. And so we're going to play one of them. So then to illustrate this time, another composer, a little bit later, who especially composed for viols. He's done a lot of vocal music for the Chapel of the King in Versailles, because in France, most of the things musically happened from the 17th century. Actually, everything happened in Versailles at the end of the century, but before, around the King, in the Louvre, in Paris. Everything is at the royal level in a way. So the nearer you go towards the end of the 17th century, the most things are centralized in Versailles and Paris. So Henri Dumont is composer for the Chapel of the King and composes for viols. So this we're going to play an animal for 4 viols. You know that there is bigger bass now, so we don't have a bigger bass. We could have a theorbo or a lute with us, but we don't have it. But at this time, the figure bass was introduced. So some of the music that has been composed at that time for the Royal Orchestra, which was called the 24 Violins of the King. I mean, actually there were no violins in it. But this music can be played in a concert with violins. Today we've got particularly a very famous amateur of this music, who is Jordan Sarai. He's loving this music and plays it a lot, and he plays it on the viol. So this is mainly orchestral music, usually for violin parts. It's played by violins, and intermediary size violins and bass violins. Maybe there were viols with them sometimes, I don't know. But I mean, this is a repertoire that can be included in the music for violin concert as well. So we're going to play a piece by Guillaume Dunadois, who was mainly a composer of ballet de cour, which was the main stage music before La Tragédie, the French opera. So the next composer is should become more famous. It's well, just before yes, this is La Collection Philidor. This piece comes from La Collection Philidor. I have to say something about it. It was commissioned by Louis XIV at the end of the century to one of the Philidor. It was a family of court composers from the beginning of the 17th century. They came actually from Scotland. And Philidor had to gather early music at the end of the 17th century because the king wanted to have music from his ancestors. So they gathered music from the reign of Henri III and Louis III, and even I think also from Consort, so beginning of the 16th century, contemporary of Henry VIII. So they gathered music of this time. And so it's a manuscript that is absolutely beautiful. And you see Allemand, Fête en l'an 1583. So that's from the time of Henry III. And it's been written in 1690. And there are still treasures, very, very good music to find there. And as I said previously, Jordi Savart has been digging into this and made programs of music from the time of Louis XIII, for example. And so he likes it very much. And indeed, there are really beautiful things to find there. Dances that were danced at the court, in the ballet, usually accompanied by many lutes, but also viols. And so that works very well on the viol. So this is available online. And so there's a lot to find there. So that's La Collection Philidor. So then Louis Couperin. This year is the 400th anniversary of his birth. And so there are things happening in France, but also here in London, because I mean, some of you probably, I know some of my friends who were there for a concert by Jean Rondeau, and they played a lot of, mainly a concert of music for viols by Louis. They have transcribed some of the keyboard music, the harpsichord music from Louis for viols. So there were, I think, 6 or 7 viols on stage. And so, and Jean Rondeau, who is known to be a very good harpsichordist in the world today, I mean, it wasn't much playing actually, it was just letting, for those who were there at the concert, he was just playing a little bit and left the viols playing the beautiful music from Louis. So a really nice concert. Also, Kelly's Concert of Viols has released recently a CD of French music, and there is music from everybody here there. Yes. So who doesn't have his CD? And there might be other events I'm not aware of, but I think that in France they're trying to do something with this 400th anniversary. Louis Couperin was an organist, a harpsichordist, but also a violin player. He was playing the violin, and sometimes there are some of the pieces from the manuscripts, because this music was not edited. We know it through a manuscript called Le Manuscrit Boin. It's a manuscript, and some of the music, it seems, is more suited for the violin than for the keyboard. So what we're going to play now, it's really made for treble and 2 basses. And it seems that at this time, I mean around 1660, there were no more tenor viols, la taille de viol. There were just treble and bass viols, and bass viol, then got the 7th string. And so you've got this illustrated, I think, on yes. You remember so there is a scene where there are 2 viols and a treble, and also there's a scene where they are singing a song with 2 bass viols. And so that would be the favorite ensemble at this time in Paris. So now we're going to play une symphonie par Monsieur Couperin, so with treble and 2 bass viols. playing organ music. There's more in keyboard music from the magnetic keyboard, from this, this is extracted. But if you take all the other music on this side, you can do a lot of concert music, very good concert music. So now I'm going to the last area that I propose, which is the late French concert music. So there is very little actually. So, but I mean, if you think of this category as European one, then I mean, you can put this category music from personal. As I mentioned at the beginning, you can play the art of the fugue on the viol and all these things. So that's what I'm calling late concert music. So at this time, very severe bass all the time, so we don't have it, but we could have it. There is more Italian influence in the style. We are artillery, and composers like Charpentier went to Italy, so they're bringing more Italian style. And it's rare because I mean there are less viols used in music. But something very French there is happening is that Lully was the superintendent for music in France, so he had all the rights on the music of the kingdom. So he owned the orchestra, the making of the tragédie, the French opera, and stage music. So he had the privilege on all music in France. So there were little left to even very talented composers like Charpentier. So Charpentier was employed by a noble lady, Mademoiselle Guise, and they had viols, and they loved viols. And so he was not, I think, even allowed to use the violin for some of his compositions or where they were playing. So they were using the viol. And it's especially mentioned that he wants to use viols like in his motets or in instrumental music. And so we composed un concert à 4 parties, which is actually concert music. So late concert music. But we're going to play the end of this suite, the 2 gigalopes, 3 beats, and Gigue française, in 4 beats, binary, and another dance that was, of course, very famous at this time, the Passacaille, in Chaconne, of this concert à 4 parties. house last year, where I proposed to a group of friends that I usually play. I said, I'm going to propose French music. It was last June. And Aisha was there. And so she said, oh, that was interesting. And Simon was there as well. And others. And then Aisha told me it would be interesting to share this music with others. And so that's why she invited me, and we created this concert like we do in our houses, amateur music as we do it. So we didn't rehearse much, and music like bullying, as you could see, is very difficult. And so it's very challenging, and I've been told that sometimes, some people have been discouraged to play this music because they found it too complex. So, but they've been very brave, and we've done it. We want to do the passage.
We have time. We're actually well.
So this is
Want to introduce Aisha, the yogi, mostly know. Luke, is it Shannon or Shannon? Fiona Peterson, who is now going between Adelaide and London, and is very new to the bar actually. Yeah. But a cellist, long-standing, like Oppenheimer, and Rodolphe Blanchard-Kowal. Now you know.
to demonstrate is that there's not much in the French repertoire, but there is really good quality music. So the few things that French composers have produced is good and interesting. And so I have this question: why is something as enjoyable as playing in a concert not present in the French culture? Today it's present when students learn the violin and they will play concert, but we will always refer to this English culture from the Renaissance and 17th century. And so there I would like to give some philosophical input about that. I've been thinking how to answer this question. Why is viol consort particularly an English phenomenon? And so the viol consort for me is a place where modern individuals, I mean the individual that raised from the 16th century, from humanism and Reformation after the Middle Ages, these individual experiences their own individuality among equals. So it's an experience of freedom in a way. And so that's why in the 17th century and of the Renaissance, it's particularly something English, because you can see this in philosophy as well. There are philosophers of this time, of liberalism, Hobbes and Locke, for example. And this is a movement that started in England, and that was not as present in France. France remained a very royal, aristocratic, and I would also say scholastic society. And so the music would be for the aristocracy. They would have the best quality, and the wealthiest, the king, the most powerful, would have the best things, the best paintings coming from Italy, and the best music of the kingdom. And so everything would be around the king at the court, and they would have the finest things. So that's why there is not, at this time, I think, a practice of concert in France. They might have done concert, as I said at the beginning, of course, friends and people playing together, but there is not such a thing as, citizens in England playing together. As a metaphor of friendship, relationship between free people, in a way. So that's my explanation about it. But so I hope you enjoy this French repertoire, and that will give you the desire to play this music as well.
Thank you very much, Rodolphe, and also to your farm. We have time for questions or discussion. Anyone want to follow up with those philosophical ideas about the free-thinking English versus the modernist French?
I heard a talk a while ago by an English singer, and I can't remember who it was, but he was talking about consort music, whether sung or played, as a collaborative puzzle that you work out together. You wouldn't have seen it before. You would not have seen it before, and you would have. He gives the example of the song "Sweet Suffolk Owl," where you're singing along with whatever, and suddenly everybody goes "Twinkle," and you all fall off at that point because it's a big surprise. And so that really seems to fit with what you're saying about working it out together rather than having someone sort of from above. Do you think it maybe kind of fits?
Yeah, it's probably the concert, this idea of voices being intertwined and being unequal. And so it's a school of it's a way of managing your freedom, not being too much present, listening to others, interacting with one another. There's a kind of ideal that is leading the concert, and so that's what I love in it. And so that's why I enjoy when we meet in our houses, and we might not be very good, we might do mistakes and play out of tune or not in the middle, but there is this fellowship that is very typical. I don't mean that it is, that has a big component of a big input of philosophical ideas of this time, of the 17th century, and we still enjoy it today. That's what I'm thinking.
Other questions? I was wondering also, just thinking about the groups of people playing this sort of music, and in England, I don't have some past past, but we were already by the late 16th, early 17th century, it was a very big middle class, mercantile class, with money, with 4 instruments, And so there was a marketing and desire and a patronage coming from the middle classes. Although often when you see these manuscripts and the collections that exist, they were often minor aristocracy anyway. But I just wondered, maybe there was more money around in the middle classes at the time to fund these groups. Because it's not because it's only groups of 5 and 6, and I've noticed a lot of this music is coming from 4-part, 5-part, that we're going for Rolls Royce 5 and 6 part, for a big group of people. So I'm wondering to do with the economics.
I think this is connected. The philosophy, economics, and politics, and art.
But clearly there's a target for the publishing in Paris, so we came to nominate for Paris is one of the great sensitive publications. So there wouldn't have been publishing if there hadn't been so.
There's an instrument which we regard as typically French, the Consort, the Canton. Was that ever scored in this period?
It's later. It's the 18th century, I think.
Right.
Yeah. Also, along with the par-dessus. I don't think the par-dessus was even used at the time of Charpentier, end of the 17th century. So that's later. And so that's another period, the period of the sonata and the suite of the 18th century. That's also the rise of this middle class in France, bourgeoisie, we would say, in France in the 18th century, those who would buy edited books of music, and then there's a great input of Italian sonata at that time. And a querelle between those who are in favor of the French style and those who are in favor of the Italian style. So this is more in the 18th century. And the canton doesn't exist in the 17th century, I don't think so.
I mean, wasn't the position that the canton and the suite invented for a lot of Amazon players as well, who seemingly didn't have the physical strength. Maybe some of them were. Sorry, I should have said. A lot of them were women players, to bring the instrument up to their shoulders to play Italian sonatas. I mean, they were violins, so they just couldn't bring themselves to play a violinist style instrument.
I heard that was we didn't want to.
You didn't want to distort your posture.
Yeah. But there's some sort of
remain. But it was the same in England. When Roger North talks about his grandfather, when the violin came in, he played it like a treble viol because he couldn't work out how to hold it that way.
They still do that in India.
Yeah. There's lots of cultures where there's small treble side instruments that play Gamba. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, we have the Arab moon and whatever else and stuff.
I was going to ask you about the movie piece, which I didn't know, and the collection it came from, which I know is quite convoluted title of Mélange des sujets chrétiens, etc. What was the role of the fantasy within that collection? Well, the pieces.
I don't know. Maybe they were used in the church, I don't know.
The edition we're playing from was done by Maurice Rogers.
Right, yeah.
No, I don't know.
Because it's quite a complicated fantasy with these changes of time, the dramatic twists and turns and things.
It's very similar to what you have in Moses, with the changes of
As if there was an implied text.
Yeah.
Alison.
But did you play consort music in France before you moved to England?
Yes.
Was it a very different experience from playing?
I mean, I was playing consort in the conservatoire, so I never experienced the thing like going to someone's house in Paris, for example, to just for amateur playing of a concert. But that might exist. When I live in Montpellier, I created, in the south of France, I created le Consort ouvert. So it was a day when we hired a hall in the city, and any violin player can come. And so we had like up to, I don't know, 12 violin players. So this kind of initiative, I did it because I love playing in concert. But this is not really a French thing. There are very good concerts in France currently, but they're professional. Yeah. Since I left France 10 years ago, so I don't know how it is now. I can't tell.
So, the really interesting, this is part of art music. The phrases at A are 11 crotchets. And it just gives rise to these totally weird rhythms. You think
It sort of establishes a dance style, and then sort of contorts it.
well, it regates the last 3 to 2, and yes, there are 5, 6 tempo changes in that. It's extremely complicated. It's the only one I managed to arrive in time to rehearse. That's right. Oh no, sorry.
Are there any other
It didn't break down.
questions or discussion points people would like to think about? If not, we say thank you to Rodolphe and